How many times have you been arrested?
I don't have an actual, factual number.
Oh. And how did you tell his mom that her son was gone?
So it's just competitive energy and things that you say about other artists while you're in hip-hop culture.
One could watch this and think that you really hate because of the things that you post on Instagram.
And I die in the street about this shit, man. This shit dead serious to me. And then when I do rap shit, man, this shit is full of this type.
50 Cent just dropped footage from the T.I. documentary, and the internet is not ready for what's inside.
Yeah, that's Phil. Oh, that's his body. I felt that, you know, all of those rounds were fired for me, you know.
What happens when the man who built his career destroying people online decides to stop joking and actually make his move? On March 5th, 2026, 50 Cent posted, then quietly removed an Instagram screenshot carrying one explosive headline. 50 Cent allegedly in development on a documentary titled Surviving T.I. and Tiny. That single post sent shockwaves through the entire music industry because nobody mistook it for clout chasing. This was a calculated shot. And to truly understand the weight behind that deleted screenshot, you have to go back to the exact moment that lit this whole fuse.
50 Cent and T.I. is back at it. 50 Cent jumped out there. He let him know that he's putting out a documentary, Surviving T.I. and Tiny. Man, listen to this. I'm gonna play where T.I. told 50 that he was getting ready to do the same thing to him. And then now 50 announced that he did it. We already know 50 know how to do it.
It all began with what everyone thought would be a historic celebration. T.I. and 50 Cent had been in serious discussions about squaring up on Versus, that legendary stage where the biggest names in rap let their catalogs do the talking, hit for hit, anthem for anthem. T.I. himself spoke about it openly, framing it as a moment of mutual appreciation between two giants, a chance for both men to stand side by side and let the world acknowledge what they had each built over 2 decades. Two of the most celebrated artists of their era finally sharing the same space, giving their bodies of work the recognition they deserved.
Okay, so first, like, you know, it was really about celebrating each other's catalog. Me and this nigga talk like this, bro. This nigga ain't just called a nigga out the blue. Me and this nigga talk like this.
You talking about you were 50?
Yeah, man, we talk like this shit, man. This shit just come out of nowhere.
But 50 Cent being 50 Cent, he did exactly what everyone who knows him should have seen coming. He switched up completely. He flat out denied that any conversation had ever taken place, played innocent in every interview like the whole Versus idea had never even crossed his mind, and then publicly humiliated T.I. with a single brutal label, King Rat. In hip-hop, that is not a casual insult. That is the most damaging thing you can call another man from the streets. It is a direct signal to everyone listening that you are a cooperator, a snitch, someone who cannot be trusted. The kind of reputation that follows a man everywhere he goes. And 50 made his position crystal clear. T.I. needed to stop saying his name.
Because if you tell him, you can't even look forward to going home.
It's gonna be hell.
Where you going after you get out? The neighborhood ain't accepting that. You bitch ass nigga, we heard you's a rat. But even for me personally, my character, they would try to attack my character. They'll say he a rat or he just a snap.
Yeah.
All you gotta do is ask him who I told him.
T.I. was not about to sit quietly with that kind of disrespect. He took his anger straight to the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast and let it all out without holding back. He made it clear that the two of them had spoken, had agreed on a plan, and that 50 had turned around and acted completely clueless the moment T.I. stepped forward publicly. The wound was not just deep, it was visible to everyone watching. What made it cut even harder was where T.I. was standing at that exact moment. His record, Let 'Em Know, had just locked in the #1 spot on urban radio and was pushing its way into mainstream charts. This was not a nostalgia run. This was a full-blown comeback that was reminding the entire industry why T.I. had always been in a class of his own. And right in the middle of all that momentum, 50 Cent's move landed like a storm cloud over everything T.I. had been quietly rebuilding. But the online call-out was only the beginning. 50 was far from finished, because there's regular hip-hop beef, and then there is something else entirely, the kind of conflict that has nothing to do with music anymore. 50 reached that point almost immediately. He went back to Instagram, the battlefield where he has spent 2 decades perfecting his attack, and this time he posted an unflattering image of T.I.'s wife, Tamika Tiny Harris. The caption kept pushing T.I. to stay out of his business, but the words were almost beside the point. The real statement was in who he chose to target. The moment 50 brought Tiny into it, the message to everyone watching was unmistakable. This was no longer about rap. He was coming for the entire family, and he wanted the whole world to see it.
At this point, 50 Cent should literally rent a wife and kids and have them make diss responses. And the fact that he would actually have to rent a woman and children to like him and to respond on his behalf on for T.I. and Tiny's whole family is telling.
T.I. was never gonna take that lying down. He did what any elite rapper does when words fail. He went straight to the music, and he moved fast. Back-to-back diss tracks started dropping, including War and The Right One, and he did not come empty-handed. On The Right One, he took direct aim at 50's entire identity, branding him a small man hiding inside a big shell. That one line was not accidental, it was surgical, crafted specifically to puncture the image of a man whose whole career has been built on projecting power, dominance, and the idea that nobody could ever touch him.
That's when you got the right one. And be honest with y'all, man, T.I. is a lyricist, man. T.I. was going. He was barring up on this one. He was barring up. You know what I'm saying? He brought up the Jadakiss situation, you know, when 50 and Jada went at it. Fat Joe, of course, Murder Inc. We all know how historic that battle is to hip hop. You know, the whole house situation, you know, with the burned down house, that whole situation, you know, with you mad at Puff because he was going at your baby mom. So yeah, he was definitely throwing some shots at 50. And to me, at a point, and like I said, I'm a fan of both T.I. and 50 Cent. It gets to a point with like the memes and stuff like that. Like, all right, we're at this limit, in my personal opinion, man. It's time to bar up.
But the line that genuinely stopped the internet cold was T.I. dropping the word dispatcher on 50 Cent. Not as a punchline, not as a metaphor, as a direct claim that 50 had worked with federal law enforcement and that actual paperwork existed. Documents sitting in prisons with 50 Cent's name attached to them, backed by men who were currently locked up. That is not something you throw into a verse for shock value. That is a formal accusation with real-world consequences, the kind that travels way beyond Spotify and Apple Music and lands in places where reputation means everything and words carry a completely different kind of weight. And T.I. was not standing alone. What happened next turned this from a rap beef into something far bigger. The entire Harris family stepped into the ring. T.I.'s sons, King Harris and Damani, both dropped their own diss tracks aimed directly at 50 Cent.
I treated people how they treated us. You know what I'm saying? It was nothing that I wanted to do. It was just something that just had to be done.
Domani, also you dropped a record. It felt more, did you get any inspiration from, like, when I heard it for the first time, it reminded me of like Meet the Grams?
I would say, man, I just have questions. I just genuinely have questions. And I'm an understanding individual, and I know the reason people do certain things, it probably stem from how they grew up, how they were raised, even me.
This had stopped being a back and forth between two rappers a long time ago. This was an entire family locking in together. In almost any other situation in this industry, that kind of united front would have been enough to make the other side pump the brakes and reassess. But 50 Cent had not been focused on Instagram or music for a while now. He had already graduated to something that nobody in hip-hop had a real answer for, and the entire industry was about to come face-to-face with exactly what that was. To fully grasp why the documentary threat landed the way it did, you first need to understand what 50 had just completed, because without that context, the screenshot is just noise. With it, the screenshot is a loaded weapon. Toward the end of 2025, 50 Cent sat in the executive producer chair for Sean Combs' The Reckoning, a Netflix documentary series that hit the culture like nothing that had come before it. The moment it dropped, it went straight to #1 on Netflix. It pulled back the curtain on the sexual assault allegations surrounding Sean Diddy Combs and placed decades of deeply troubling industry behavior directly in front of a global audience that had previously only heard rumors and whispers. Nobody had ever put it on screen at that scale, with that kind of visibility and that kind of reach. It became the single most discussed documentary of the entire year, and 50 Cent's involvement was stamped all over it. Netflix would later go on record clarifying that 50 did not hold complete creative authority over the project and that the people who participated were not compensated. But those clarifications did almost nothing in the real world, because what the public remembered was not the fine print. What the public remembered was the aftermath, and the aftermath for Diddy was absolutely devastating. What 50 had just demonstrated to every single person watching was something the music industry had never been forced to confront before. A documentary is a weapon that operates on a completely different level than a diss track. It outlasts a lawsuit. It does more sustained damage than any amount of social media activity ever could. It does not disappear after a few weeks. It lives permanently on a platform. It gets recommended to new viewers. It gets clipped and reshared. It follows the subject into every conversation about them for the rest of their life. So when that screenshot surfaced showing 50 referencing a T.I. documentary, his caption alone was enough to make everyone scrolling through their phones stop completely. He wrote that people should remember how silent he went before the Diddy project. That one line needed no further explanation. He was not talking about making a song. He was not talking about posting memes. He was signaling that he was prepared to do to Clifford Harris exactly what he had done to Sean Combs. Identify the story, secure the platform, and let the documentary accomplish what no verse ever could. And then there was the title he had attached to the project. That title by itself was the sharpest part of the entire threat: Surviving T.I. and Tiny. Anyone who had been paying even minimal attention to entertainment news over the past several years knew exactly what those words were designed to evoke.
But now, since 50 posted that he's doing the documentary, maybe you'll believe him. He just posted it this morning. But anybody in the loop knows that T.I. and Tiny have had several allegations of SA.
And anyone who understood what that title was referencing knew precisely what kind of project this was being built to be. Taking direct inspiration from the Sean Combs Reckoning blueprint, the reported documentary was allegedly being constructed to drag the assault accusations that have been publicly directed at T.I. and Tiny back into the center of the national conversation, arriving at the most damaging moment imaginable for the couple's image and reputation. Celebrity blogger Tasha K, who has never been a stranger to being in the middle of exactly these kinds of high-profile controversies, came forward claiming she had spoken directly to people connected to 50's inner circle, alleging that the project was not just an idea, but was actively being put together. None of those claims have been officially verified or confirmed by any party involved. But in the world where hip-hop gossip operates, a rumor does not need a certificate of authenticity to start doing real damage, and 50 Cent understood that reality more precisely than anybody else in the room, which is exactly why that post was not carelessly thrown together. He uploaded it during peak traffic hours, gave the internet just enough time to screenshot it, spread it across every platform, and let the media write the headlines on his behalf, and then he pulled it down. Gone, but not forgotten. Just enough smoke left hanging in the air to keep everyone guessing whether the fire had already been lit behind the scenes. The deleted post also carried a line aimed like a knife directly at T.I.'s promotional campaign. He wrote that he hoped the situation would not interfere with T.I.'s promo run, adding that interviewers were going to be asking about the assault cases. That was not a throwaway comment. T.I. had been building toward his upcoming album Kill the King as the definitive closing chapter of his career, a final legacy statement from one of the most celebrated voices Southern rap has ever produced, entirely on his own terms. Every single interview slot, every magazine cover, every radio appearance was supposed to be dedicated entirely to celebrating the music and what he had built. 50 Cent was making a very deliberate move to ensure that not a single one of those conversations would stay focused on the music. But the legal history sitting underneath all of this is significantly more layered than either camp wants the public to fully understand. This part of the story requires care because the actual facts have been pulled and twisted in every possible direction by people on all sides who have their own reasons for wanting the narrative to land a certain way. In March of 2021, attorney Tyrone A. Blackburn stepped in front of cameras for a press conference that sent genuine shockwaves through the entertainment industry. He revealed that over 30 women had independently come forward with accusations against T.I. and Tiny Harris, allegations involving forced drugging, kidnapping, sexual assault, and intimidation, describing behavior that had allegedly been ongoing for more than 15 years and had taken place across multiple states. The accusations were specific, deeply troubling, and they consumed entertainment media coverage for weeks straight.
It's already been known that there are 30 women, at least, that have had allegations of being kidnapped, drugged, raped. Y'all know what those words mean. And 50 Cent is saying he got 20 of them in this Surviving T.I. and Tiny coming.
The LAPD launched a formal investigation into the matter. Investigators took the allegations seriously enough to assign dedicated resources, conduct interviews, and examine the claims from multiple angles. At the conclusion of that process, however, prosecutors chose not to move forward with any criminal charges. The primary obstacle was the statute of limitations. Simply put, too much time had passed between when the alleged incidents reportedly occurred and when the formal complaints were actually filed for the legal system to act on most of what had been brought forward. That outcome did not function as a declaration of innocence. What it meant was that the criminal justice system operates within a specific legal window, and that window had been shut for a long time. The civil legal battles dragged on somewhat longer, but in August of 2024, a federal judge threw out one of the most high-profile civil suits against the couple, with T.I. and Tiny's legal team confirming the court had found no viable claims from the plaintiff. Throughout everything, T.I. and Tiny held a single, consistent position without wavering. The claims were fabricated, they were not going to be pressured into anything, and they were not going anywhere. The courtrooms had done their work, criminal cases closed, civil suits dismissed. On paper, T.I. and Tiny had real, documented legal protection standing behind them. But 50 Cent was never interested in what happened inside a courtroom. He was operating inside a completely different arena, a media ecosystem where public perception moves at a speed no legal ruling can ever match, and where he had already shown the entire world in explicit detail exactly how to dominate that ecosystem when he chose to. Curtis James Jackson III did not arrive at this level of influence by chance, and he did not become the most feared media force in the music industry by accident either. What he has built over the years represents one of the most intentional and methodical transformations the entertainment world has ever witnessed. He started as a battle rapper, became a multi-platinum artist, evolved into the internet's most effective troll, and then upgraded himself again into a full-scale documentary producer, every single phase more dangerous than the one before it. In the early 2000s, a diss track was enough to end careers. By the 2010s, he had mastered Instagram, perfectly timed posts, cutting captions, and unflattering images deployed in front of tens of millions of followers before the target even knew what had hit them. But by the middle of the 2020s, 50 had moved his operation into territory that the music industry had absolutely no framework to defend against. The Diddy documentary removed any remaining doubt about what he was now capable of. It proved that 50 Cent could attach his name to a project that would sit permanently on Netflix, get fed algorithmically to brand new audiences for years on end, and fundamentally change how the entire world perceived someone he had decided to go after. Netflix stepping in to clarify that he did not hold complete creative control, and that participants received no compensation, changed absolutely nothing about the real-world impact. The only thing that mattered was the result. And beyond the documentary itself, 50 made it known publicly that roughly 140 hours of footage had been recorded that never made it into the final cut, and that he could release that material directly to YouTube whenever he chose to. No network approval needed, no editorial oversight, no filter of any kind. That was not casual conversation. That was an active, standing threat, backed by actual material. And now that exact same machine was being pointed directly at T.I. The gap between a rapper taking shots at you in a song and a media operator building a documentary about you is not simply a question of size. It is a question of how long the damage lasts. A song eventually falls off playlists. A documentary plants itself permanently on a platform. It becomes the top result the moment anyone searches your name. It walks into every room ahead of you for the remainder of your career. 50 Cent grasped that reality more clearly than anyone else involved in this situation. And that brought everyone to the question that the entire industry was now sitting with. Where does all of this leave T.I.? He is occupying a position that no artist ever wants to find themselves in, simultaneously trying to lock in a legacy while fighting to protect a reputation that someone with serious resources and serious motivation is actively trying to tear apart. Kill the King was supposed to be his send-off, the final chapter from one of the most celebrated MCs the 2000s ever produced. The man who handed Atlanta its blueprint before Atlanta handed the world trap music. A #1 record, a full promotional run, the kind of closing lap that a rapper earns after surviving 2 full decades of everything this industry is capable of throwing at you. Instead, every single conversation surrounding that album now exists permanently underneath a shadow that is shaped exactly like 50 Cent. And 50 made absolutely certain it was not only the documentary threat carrying the weight, he brought it into the music as well. On the Power Origins theme song tied to his television franchise, he dropped bars that directly referenced the assault allegations against T.I. and Tiny. There is no alternative interpretation of that line. It was a precise and calculated move designed specifically to keep those allegations circulating in headlines, comment sections, and conversations about T.I.'s career for as long as humanly possible. The documentary itself has no official confirmation attached to it. No network has stepped forward. No release date appears on any calendar anywhere. But 50 Cent has built something that very few people in his position ever managed to construct: the credibility of his own threats. When he disappeared before the Diddy project dropped, the industry treated it as theater. Nobody is treating anything as theater right now. So here is the question that deserves serious thought long after this video is over. Is 50 Cent a truth teller without fear, forcing powerful men to answer for things the legal system was structurally designed to let slide? Or is he someone carrying a deeply personal grudge, armed with a production budget and a global platform, using allegations that courts have already closed the door on as ammunition in a conflict that was originally supposed to be about a rap battle? The boundary separating justice from revenge has never looked this unclear, and the full weight of T.I.'s legacy may ultimately depend on which side of that line 50 Cent is actually operating from. If this breakdown gave you something to think about, drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found value in this video, show some love and hit that like button. Make sure you are subscribed for the latest updates and turn on your notifications so you never miss what we drop next. Until next time.